record. Okay, so we are continuing with our chapter number 2. Okay, the current topic that we will discuss in chapter number 2 is what the hell? Just a second, let me just launch the page again. Oops, what is happening? I am paired. Yeah, okay, good. So we call it the accounting cycle. The accounting cycle actually represents the complete workflow. We know that our accounting requires evaluation of business, and business evaluation के लिए we draw what we call financial statements. Financial statements are going to be statements which consist of facts and figures which will help you evaluate a specific area of accounting. For example, one of the most important performance indicator, as we discussed in the previous chapters, is profit. So there is one financial statement which is dedicated just to calculation of the profits. We call it the income statement. Then there is another financial statement which is dedicated to just evaluate one other specific aspect called cash and cash equivalent. So we have another one called the cash flow statement, which will help us to enable that particular area. The third one is the balance sheet that we have already familiarized ourselves with in chapter number 1, right? So these financial statements are going to be our end objective when we are doing bookkeeping part or accounting part in general. But how do we arrive at those? It consists of certain stages of progress. So I'm going to list down all the stages of progress, and we refer to them as the accounting cycle. So our accounting cycle, or what we call the workflow, that how a professional accountant approaches a particular financial period and then arrive at the financial statement in the end. Our workflow starts with transactions. Right? As soon as there is a financial transaction, we need to determine its nature in terms of debits and credits, and then we need to record the transaction in the books. So the next stage is what we call bookkeeping stage, but that bookkeeping stage consists of 2 sub-stages. The first one is what we call the journal. The journal, we record all these transactions into a book called the journal. We'll discuss the journal in a bit. And then we record the same transaction into another book called the ledger. So one transaction, as soon as it happens, it first goes to the journal. We refer to them as also as books of prime entry. Right? A book of prime entry, or later on in some other chapter we will see that we will have multiple journals or multiple books of prime entry. But for now, what you need to understand is that every time a transaction happens, it needs to be recorded in 2 different places. So we have one book called the journal, and the other one is what we call the ledger. Then the question, before I move on to the next stage of the accounting cycle, comes a natural question in mind: why do we have to double the workload? Why can't we just do away with one book every time? You just need, basically the purpose is to keep a record of your transactions. So if you want to keep a record of your transactions, every time a transaction happens, you just record it in the journal or you record it in the ledger. Why record in both the books? Why increase your workload? Why double your workload? So any ideas why we need to record transactions in 2 different books simultaneously? Why can't we just do away with just one book? जैसे अभी आप imagine, इसकी analogy आप इस तरह से ले सकते हैं कि अभी आप probably you are making notes on your notebook. Imagine the same information you have to record in 2 different notebooks simultaneously. Well, that makes no sense. I mean, one notebook is enough for you to make lectures, these class notes. Why do you have to create another copy of that later on, right? Okay. So any ideas why we need to record our financial transactions? Excellent, Madiha. Madiha, I believe you left the WhatsApp group yesterday. If I'm not wrong, it was you probably. But I thought that probably you have also decided to drop the subject, but I'm really glad to see you back here. So was it by mistake or what? Because you're not supposed to leave the official WhatsApp group. I see, I see, I see. Okay, ठीक है, कोई बात नहीं, ठीक है. All right. So, yeah. Any ideas? Oh, okay, Madiha has mentioned a very important use over here. Madiha said to reduce the chances of error. This is very important because आप अगर एक ही जगह पे transactions को record कर रहे हैं, it's a possibility that you can make an error, but the same error will be repeated in another book at another time. The chances are कि वो हो सकता है, but you can see that the possibility of the committing the error is significantly low, right? So one very important use is because we know that our transactions analysis, our financial analysis are very sensitive analysis. So we don't want to make any mistakes in recording, because if we make a mistake in the recording part, then this mistake is going to, the effect of this mistake is going to trickle down and eventually pollute your financial statements. You don't want to make a false financial statement. You want to make an accurate financial statement. The second, Marine says, journal records individual transactions. Yes, so does Ledger. Actually, Marine, Ledger भी individually transaction करता है, but Ledger एक additional layer उसके ऊपर add कर देता है कि वो ना सिर्फ individual transactions को record कर रहा होता है, but it also groups the transactions into accounts. Don't worry, the beginners, don't worry here. We will discuss this procedure over here, what Marine has just mentioned. But yeah, Alicia Azim says maybe for different types of transactions like debit and credit. Yes, Alicia, because we will see when we start with the recording procedures, both these books will break down the transaction into a debit and credit, and we record the same transaction twice in two different places. So debits and credits obviously will be used. Our medium of recording is always going to be debits and credits. But why is that? The Madiha's answer is there. One error. I'm looking for three. I'm looking for three reasons why we do this. So the first reason was, let me just put a summary over here. Madiha pointed out errors. Take it, or basically the correct way of putting that should be that reducing the possibilities or chances, reducing the chances of error, as Madiha correctly posts there. Errors. Okay. This Maheen was saying while journal brings all transactions at one place. Yeah. Okay, let me just save time here and start moving. Amal has some answer too. Maybe the journal is used for daily short-term transactions while the ledgers record short-term and long-term transactions. Amal, every transaction, whether it's short-term expenditures on assets or long-term expenditures on assets or short-term expenditures on expenses or whatever, every single transaction, regardless of the nature of transaction, regardless of the type of transaction, every single transaction is going to be recorded in both the books. Basically, we are making two copies of the same set of transactions. The question is, why do we have to? Yes, Fajr, there you go. If one get misplaced, we always have a backup. This is the other reason. Why do you make a copy of your notes? Because for safekeeping, financial information is extremely sensitive information. You don't want to mess up your records because of there was an error. You don't want to lose your records. If all the information is recorded in just one place and God forbid you lose it, you're gone. There is no way to recover that information. So the second one, very important use. Fajr, thank you for that. This was backup. Okay, a safety backup, right? And the third one, let me just wrap it over here, reducing the possibilities, reducing the chances of frauds, right? Lina, it's quite late here. Okay. ओके अलीना, आज आप लेट हो गए बेटे. So reducing the chances of frauds, right? In smaller organization, there is only one bookkeeper. The same bookkeeper records the transactions in the journal and the ledger. Over there, probably this factor is not relevant because if it's the same bookkeeper, bookkeeper is the person who maintains the books. So if the same bookkeeper is making transactions or recording transactions in both the books, then probably, and if that person has a malintent, then you cannot stop fraud. But usually in larger organizations, there are separate bookkeepers. Some are deployed in maintaining the books of prime entry or journals. Some are deployed to just maintain ledgers. So if you have two different groups of individuals and you feed them with the same set of transactions, there is always a natural check and balance. And that check and balance help you to avoid the chances or possibilities of fraud. Frauds will still happen. जब आप लेटर ऑन प्रोफेशनल लेवल्स पे अकाउंटिंग जाके पढ़ेंगे, वहाँ पर आपको स्पेशल कोर्सेज होंगे जिसके अंदर आप फ्रॉड डिटेक्शन एंड फ्रॉड प्रिवेंशन की टेक्निक्स पढ़ेंगे. बट फ्रॉड्स आर स्टिल गोइंग टू हैपन. So this is the professional level subject that we are going to leave it over there. But for now, we understand that we need to have two records of transactions because we want to reduce the possibilities of errors. Number one, we need to have a backup. If journal or ledger, one of the two is lost, we always have the other source to create the information, recreate the information. And thirdly, to reduce the possibility of frauds. Again, these are just the reduction of chances. Not that they won't happen. They will happen. We have chapters coming up to deal with these events when they happen. So far so good. Give me a green check. If you have any question, then give me a red mark, right? फजर आप नहीं हो बेटे, आपने participants पे की टैप participants के ऊपर अगर आप टैप करेंगे ना तो आपके पास नीचे yes no के buttons बने हुए, so you can give me the feedback over there. अलीना बेटा नहीं समझ आई? मैरीन आपको समझ नहीं आई बेटे? आपकी तरफ से feedback नहीं आ गया. Okay. अलीना, can you hear me बेटा? अलीना, sir I joined. Okay, ठीक है, fine, don't worry, ठीक है. It's okay, we are just discussing the process. Abhi hum iski implementation karenge, that is more important. So don't worry, you will catch up. So the next stage after the transaction is recorded safely in the two separate books, right? Then you move on further to the third stage. We call the third stage as the trial balance, right? The trial balance is not a book. These two are the books. This stage is what we call bookkeeping part. So bookkeeping is simply the act of recording transactions. So bookkeeping is when the transactions अभी हमने नहीं पढ़ा अलीना, तो अभी हमें पढ़ेंगे इसको अभी. Don't worry, so we just need to. So journal and ledger are two books where we keep the transactions, and then this next stage, trial balance. We don't know anything about any of these terms so far. We are going to discuss all these terms one by one. What do they mean? Right now, I'm just trying to introduce the terminology over here. So trial balance is a statement which will summarize everything that you have recorded here. So first we will learn how to record in the journal, how to record a transaction in the journal. Then we learn how to record a transaction in the ledger. And then we will see that how these two are going to be summarized into a one-page statement called the trial balance. We will learn over the course of next couple of chapters. So don't worry. Right now, I'm just giving you a roadmap of what is going to happen at this point until the end of chapter 5. And then the fourth stage here, financial statements. So this is how we are going to arrive at the end of the accounting cycle. So our objective is basically there is one more stage after that, which is what we call interpretation. But for now, we can skip that. We will do it in A2. So our accounting cycle consists of 4 stages. It starts with the transaction, but then these transactions need to be recorded in one book called specialized book. We call it the journal or book or prime entry. The same transaction goes into another book called the ledger. Why do we do this twice? Because of these 3 points. We want to reduce the chances of errors. We want to create a backup in case one of the two sources is lost. And we need to reduce the possibilities of fraud. So that's why we do this. And then finally, we create a trial balance. And then we use the same trial balance to construct ourselves the financial statements. So we know what the financial statements we have. We have 3 financial statements. One is what we call the income statement, right? And the second one is what we call the cash flow statement. And the third one is what we are already familiar with, called the balance sheet. So our objective is to reach this point here, right? And we can't reach here directly. We need to learn to organize our transactions first to make sure that they're accurate and you have a safety backup and they are not fraudulent. Then we convert the set of transactions into a summarized list called the trial balance, and then we use the summarized list to finally achieve our financial statements. So these are different stages, and now we are going to explore one by one. So आज हम journal करेंगे और कुछ part of the ledger करेंगे. But जब हमारी next class होगी, we'll continue with the ledger, and then we will learn how to convert ledger into a trial balance. And then later on in chapter number 5, we will see how we convert a trial balance into a set of financial statements. Okay, so let's start with the journal. अच्छा, हमारे पास book I think there are a few girls जिन्होंने मुझे कल मैसेज किया था, उनको बुक नहीं मिली कल तक. तो अब we will continue with the same worksheet as we were using this, in the previous week. So hopefully when we have our next class on Wednesday, नहीं आज Wednesday, we have our next class now on Monday, I believe, right? So Monday को hopefully we will all have the book and we will continue with the book, with the new book, and we can get rid of the worksheets routine. So let me bring the worksheet back. Where is the worksheet? This is the worksheet here. Okay. So now take a look at 2.3. Take it, 2.3. Acha, oh, sorry. Do we have any problems with 2.1? I'm sorry, I forgot to ask. मैंने आपको 2.1 or 2.2 करने को कहा था. I sent the answer to 2.1 and 2.2 last night. So I hope that you have attempted 2.1 and 2.2 and you have checked your work. If there is any problem, any particular transaction that you do not agree with the answer that I sent you last night. So anyone, 2.1 or 2.2, any problem? Before we start with 2.3, 2.3 is where we are going to observe this accounting cycle here. ठीक है, हम ये वाला accounting cycle हम 2.3 में अब यहाँ से शुरू करेंगे, लेकिन उससे पहले we need to make sure that 2.1 and 2.2 there are no issues there. So give me a green check if you have no problems with 2.1 and 2.2. Give me a red check if there is a problem or you have not even attempted them. Okay, ठीक है, right. Acha, great. So now let's take 2.3. We are given a set of transactions. We have to write up the assets, liabilities, and capital accounts, and we have to learn to record the transaction, even though this particular question requires only the ledger. It does not ask you to make the journal, but for our practice, we are first we'll move in order. The first stage is to construct the journal and then convert that journal into a ledger and then move on to a trial balance. So we will first use this set of instructions to find the journal or to find the journals, to enter the transactions in the journal. And then we are going to, let me just merge this into window. Okay. Fajr, from where can I get answers to these exercises? I will provide you with the answers, Fajr. The worksheet is already there on Google Classroom. When you join Google Classroom, you'll find it over there. And on Google Classroom, you will also find the link to join the WhatsApp group. You must join the WhatsApp group because that is where the school will monitor the activity. कि कौन आएगा और कौन जाएगा, who is officially enrolled. And I will post the answers to these exercises uh, on Google Classroom, right? So don't worry. So 2.3, we will start with the journal. Let me find a fresh page here. Let me make it bigger. Right. So this is how we make a journal. This is taken from Frankwood. FW I use for Frankwood. The worksheet I took from Frankwood. And after we get the new book, I am going to, when we start the new book, I will give the references of the new book. We will first make the journal. So that's how a journal is going to be made. Rather, let me just draw a full line. You can even buy journals. What the hell? From bookshops. You can go to any bookshop and you can ask them, can I have an accounting journal? They will give you. Obviously, you're not supposed to buy it because वो journal जो है वो professional environment के अंदर use होने होते हैं. So you'll see a printed layout on every page of the journal, and the printed layout somewhat looks like this. So you have an extreme left-hand corner column for date. Then you have a description column or particulars column. Then you have amount to be debited and amounts to be credited, right? So we have learned from our previous classes that how we break down a transaction into a debit and credit. And so now we learn how we record these transactions into the journal. So we go with the first transaction, started business with $15,000 in the bank. So in the date column, we are going to record the date 20x7 here, 1st of July, right? 20x7 is a fictitious year. It's not a real year. It's just that the authors have this habit to use fictitious years ताकि जब उनकी books update होनी हो तो उनको बार-बार years change ना करने पड़े. So 20x7 you can take as 2017 or 2007 or 2027, anything. X is replaceable basically. So X is just like a placeholder. So you can assume any fictitious year, 20x7. In the date column July 1, and then we are going to break down this transaction into its representative debit and credit entries. We always write the debit entry first in the journal or in any financial record जहाँ पे formal bookkeeping हो रही है. It is understood that the first entry that appears is the debit entry, and credit entry always appears after the debit entry. So in this case, I'm going to put the debit entry first. I am going to debit the bank account, and I always put this term account next to every item that I'm going to place in the journal. Bank account is going to be debited with $15,000 over here, and then I'm going to leave that space here, and somewhere halfway through this column I will put the credit entry. So capital account is going to be credited. Capital account is going to be credited, and that's how the journal is going to be recorded. Make sure that you leave this space. So when this entry, it doesn't really say debit kya ho raha hai, credit kya ho raha hai, but it is understood that the first entry starting with without any indent from the left is understood to be the debit entry, and then you leave this indent somewhere halfway through this column. You put the credit side entry over there, right? So that's how the first transaction is going to be recorded. After that, you are required to put a narrative, right? A narrative is a simple description of the transaction that you have just recorded. You just describe it in words. So There is no specific way of writing the transaction, but you can always use your own expression here. For example, let me just write it like this: entry representing owner's contribution or owner's investment. You could write always, you could write owner's, that would be easier, simpler. Entry representing owner's investment in the business, right? You write the small statement which just simply describes the transaction that you have just entered, then you draw a line under the description, and that's how one transaction is recorded in the journal, right? So let me go over again. You always write the debit amount first. Never write the credit amount before debit. So always put the debit amount first. You just put the financial year reference once here, put the date here, put the debit amount here, or debit entry first. Put the debit entries amount in the correct column. Then leave a little space somewhere halfway through the journal description column. You put the credit entry and you put the amount over there, and then followed by that is a narrative. A narrative is a simple description in everyday language that what does this particular transaction mean. Why we need the narrative here is because that usually business associates, not all of them, or not all of the business associates have an understanding of what debit and credit means, right? For example, it's a new language. I mean, people related to accounting department, they already know what they mean, but it does not necessarily, your owner does not necessarily have to have some accounting knowledge. The owner doesn't understand anything what's written over there. Your sales department people, your finance, other than the finance department, any other department people do not understand this language, but they do need access to your financial records at some point. So this is for their help. For non-accounting professionals associated with your business, they probably need to access the financial records and they do not understand this new language. So you put them a little narrative for their help here. Okay, so we understand the formalities when we come to recording anything in the journal. Give me a green check. Okay, good, good. If anything you need to ask, a red cross will do. Okay, so and we also understand that bank account will be debited and capital account will be credited, right? Why are we debiting the bank account? Because our asset is increasing. That's why bank account is an asset and asset is increasing, and that's why we're debiting the bank account. Why are we crediting the capital account? Because our obligations are increasing, right? And the obligation in this case is the capital, the capital account, yeah. So if we disagree with the debit and credit or we don't understand this, then please give me a red mark here if you don't understand the double entry. The double entry means debit and credit components, right? If you don't understand the debit and credit components, then please give me a red cross. I will explain it again. Otherwise, a green check, please. Okay, Hadia, Iman, Asma. Okay, okay, right. Maruk, oh, Maruk, good to have you back. Maruk, you've missed a lot of classes and you have to make up. All the recordings are there on Google Classroom. Please go through them as quickly as possible before it's too late, because once we cross a certain threshold, there is no going back. Remember, तो वो फिर आपको accounting बिल्कुल भी समझ नहीं आएगी, right? So make sure you go through all the lectures. Understood, Maruk? Okay, great, excellent. The next transaction is that bought office furniture paying by check. So we are going to break it down into its debit and credit components. So July the 2nd, we will debit the furniture account. and we credit, again, we will follow the same formalities. We are going to first put the debit entry. The debit the furniture account by check, so $1,200 here, and then we are going to leave that indent, and we are going to put the credit entry, which is in this case the bank account, $1,200, and then we write the narrative entry representing owner purchase of furniture. Any clear description will do. Anything that describes this entry for non-accounting personnel. So we draw this line, and that's how we do this transaction. So if we agree with the double entry part, that means what to debit and what to credit, and we also understand the formalities involved in recording the journal, again, give me a green check. Okay, if you have any disagreement anywhere, do not give me a green check, give me a red cross. फजर आप participants की window पे जाके ना, वहाँ पे आपके पास non-verbal feedback की keys दी हुई, you can simply press yes or no there, right? Okay, good. The next transaction now, we are going to continue with this. The next transaction here is that bought office machinery, $1,400 on credit from Trees Limited. So we are buying machinery on credit from Trees Limited. So we are going to record this transaction here, July the 3rd. We debit the machinery account because our asset is increasing. And now I'm going to use a short version of account, because account is to be written with next to every item's name. So we are allowed to use A/C for a short for account, and you can also use that. So machinery account is going to be debited with with the $1,400, and then halfway through the description section, I'm going to write Trees Limited 1,400, and I am going to write the narrative here, entry representing the purchase of machine on credit from Trees Limited. I'm not going to write the full length over here, but you understand what's written over there. Then we draw a line. I just want to save some time. I want to keep some time for the ledger too. So that's how we will do this, right? Take it. Oh, what's wrong with this software today? Okay, so I'm going to make it visible here. You can see the July the 3rd, we are buying machinery. Machinery account will be debited because machinery is an asset and asset is increasing. We debit the asset, and we credit Trees Limited account because our obligation towards Trees Limited is also increasing. So we credit the Trees Limited account, we put the amounts in the relevant column, and we give the narrative. So we understand. Please give me a green check for the third transaction quickly. Excellent, Fajr. Thank you. What about Madiha and Maheen and Minal? आपको नहीं समझ आई बेटा? Maheen, Pervez, and Minal Iqbal. Okay. Minal probably has some connectivity issues. Okay, Minal got it too. Okay, now you have 5 minutes to record the rest of the transactions. You have the layout right in front on screen, and I will make it bigger. I hope that the transactions are visible. I recommend that you always download the sheet. So July 8th, this part is visible. Okay. So take 5 minutes and quickly complete the journal. After the journal is done, we are moving on to the ledger part. So 5 minutes, right? Right now it's 11. So 11:05 that hopefully the journal will complete. And then I will call out the entries one by one. You can check your work. So jaldi se, and as soon as you're finished the journal, then please give me a green check on the participants window so that I know that you have completed your work. We have 5 minutes to go. If you have trouble sorting out any entry, then unmute your mic and ask me, or write in the chat box. Adya says, is credit and debit amount always equal? Yes, it's always equal because the action and the reaction are always opposite and equal. Remember? We started the double entry wala part. Hadia missed a very critical lecture yesterday. Hadia, आपने ज़रूर वो class recording मैंने post की हुई. You have to go through that entire hours long recording. That was a very important thing that you missed yesterday. That is why probably you'll have some problems today. Great. Can you please solve the 8th July entry? Asma, yes, of course I will. 8th July is sold some office furniture not suitable for the business. $150 on credit to D. Twig and Sons. So basically what you have to do is just identify the significant parts of the transaction and leave out the irrelevant details, right? So what is happening here? Let me use here. So we have sold the office furniture. So that means our asset is decreasing. So office furniture is the is what we will credit because our asset is in decreasing. Office furniture is what we are losing. But at the same time, D. Twigs and Sons is becoming a receivable, a debtor to us. D. Twig and Sons, they owe us this $150. So let me just put a green highlight over here. So D. Twig and Sons represent an asset. And that asset is what we call a receivable or a trade receivable or a debtor. And they owe us, that means they have become our asset. So asset called D. Twig and Son is increasing. And furniture is another asset that we are losing because we're selling that furniture. So that furniture account is going to be credited. So how we write it? Let me just write here. July 8th, we debit D. Twig and Sons account, we debit, and we credit the furniture account with 150, right? And then we put the narrative here, and then we do this. We understand, Asma? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, carry on with the next. And as Marine Pervez has done, very good, Marine. Just hold on. Just wait for your friends to catch up. Right? Fajr is done. Iman is done. Excellent. हाथिया बेटे आपको समझ आ रही है? Because आपने कल की क्लास मिस कर दी थी, इसलिए I'm a little worried about that. Okay, good, Hadia. Okay, Maheen is done. Maheen Marceline is also done. Very good, Maheen. Maheen is also finished. Excellent. Minal is finished too. Very good. Amna Kashif is done. Excellent, Amna. Alina Vakas is done. Alina Sayed is also done. Maheen Marceline is done. And Madiha Shahzad is finished as well. Okay, so let's wait for your friends. Amal is done. Isha is done. Alicia is also finished. Iman, are you done with it? Yes. Okay, Iman. Iman, always leave the green check over there ताकि मुझे पता लगता रहे कि आपने कर दिया. Okay. So I'm going to call out the remaining entries one by one. हमने 4 entries so already you can see on the let me clear the check marks. Okay. So the July the 5th transaction bought a van paying by check. We debit the van account and we credit the bank account. अगर आपको किसी एंट्री में आपकी गलती होगी तो आपने माइक अनम्यूट करके या टेक्स्ट में मेरे भी छोड़ देना. ठीक है. देन 8th जुलाई वाली ट्रांजैक्शन हम ऑलरेडी कर चुके हैं. यू कैन सी दैट ऑन द स्क्रीन. 15th of July paid the amount owing to Trees Limited $1,400 by check. So we debit Trees Limited account and we credit the bank account. Then 23rd is received the amount due from D Twigs and Sons. 150 in cash, so we debit cash account $150 and we credit D Twigs account $150. Then we have bought more machinery by check $650, so we debit machinery account and we credit the bank account. So if you have all the transactions, I just called out the answers of the remaining transactions that we did not do on the screen. So if you have your answers correct and verified, please give me a green check so that I'll move on. All right, Adya, Iman, and Misha. Misha, we agree. Do we have a problem? अगर आपकी कोई transaction ठीक नहीं है तो आप मुझसे पूछ सकते हैं before we move on to that. Good. If all agree. Now, so we finished the first stage here. We learned how we enter the transactions into a journal. Now the same transactions that we recorded in the journal were being posted in the ledger simultaneously, right? So we have not been maintaining the ledger, but now we will see how we convert the ledger journal record into a ledger posting. So let's see how the ledger goes. How much time do we have? We have 11:08 right now and we have 22 minutes. Yeah, we have good time. So the ledger, how does ledger, this is how the ledger looks like. Now, ledger is just like journal, a notebook, just like the notebook that you're using right now to record any class notes. So when you open the ledger, right, then you see 2 pages of your notebook. Let's say अगर आपके पास जो भी notebook है, आप उसको बंद थी और आपने उसको खोला, तो आपके पास this has certain bugs. So these are basically you're looking at an open book from above. This is what it means. So when you open a book or a notebook, you see 2 pages, the left side here and the right page over here. In the ledger, we don't consider them as 2 pages. We consider both these pages as one, right? So this is what we call, this is the page number 1, right? So page number 1 is the 2 pages together when you see the open book from above, right? The left side, this T form is actually representing an open book when you're looking at it from above, right? So the left page of this part is what we call the debit side. This form, ये जो T form है, this is what we call an account. So basically what you have been writing here above, that you need to debit the bank account and you need to credit the capital account and the account for furniture account, the term account that you were using, you were actually referring to a page of a ledger. So what do we mean by an account? An account is simply a page of a book called ledger. So an account is always going to be represented in your working like this T-shaped format. The left side of an account is understood to be the debit side, right? Because left, debit means left, right? And the right side here is always the credit side. So this is your debit side and this is your credit side. It's always going to be like that. So now we will refer back to the journal that we have just prepared. we see that the first transaction that we recorded in the journal wants us to record this entry on two different pages of the ledger. The journal entry instructs you that go to the bank account in the ledger and make a debit side entry of $15,000, then go to the credit side of the capital account and make a credit side entry of $15,000. So how do we do this? We will need two accounts here in the ledger. One for bank, this is your bank account, and the other one for capital. Let me make another capital account here. So this is your capital account. So from the journal's instruction, we need to debit bank account $15,000. That means debit side entry on the bank account for $15,000 and credit side entry in the capital account for the same amount. So we will choose, how do we do this? We put here $15,000 on the debit side and we put the credit side $15,000 here, right? So do we understand this part so far? Give me a green check. Abhi hum baki ki formalities fulfill karte hain, but so far understood? Please give me a green check, everyone. I don't want anyone to be left behind. Amal Mariam, bete, aapko nahi samajh aaya? Madiha and Maureen. Alina has asked a question. In 15th July, what would be the entry representing statements? 15th of July. Acha, main aage chalta hu. 15th of July is paid the amount owing to Trees Limited by check. So you can write the narrative for this transaction as entry representing payment to Tree Limited by check. You can just summarize the same transaction. You can just put a summary of the transaction information given in the question. Amal did not understand it. Okay. I'll explain Amal in a bit. Take it. Alina, we get it better? A narrative is any description that can describe the meaning of what you have recorded. You can write entry representing settlement of debt with Trees Limited. You can write entry representing payment of a check to Trees Limited. You can write anything that describes the meaning to a layman, someone who does not understand the debit and credit uske liye. Right. Okay, Amal. Now, let me just see the first transaction here. It says in the journal, you understand the journal transaction? You have no problem with the journal, right, Amal? Okay. You can unmute your mic if there is anything you need to discuss in detail. So we understand that journal, basically what journal is a set of instruction to what we need to do in the ledger. So the journal entry is simply a set of instructions. So journal entry is telling you that bank account should be debited with $15,000 and capital account should be credited with $15,000 in the ledger. So journal is recording a transaction, number one, and number two, it is further instructing what to do in the ledger. So bank account should be debited in the ledger by 15,000 and capital account should be credited with in the ledger. So how do we do this? We create this T layout here that one page represents bank account and the second page here, page number 2, we are going to create capital account. So bank account is debited like this. This is how bank account is debited in the ledger, and that's how the capital account is going to be credited in the ledger, right? So don't worry. At first, you will find it a little confusing, but as we post more and more transactions from journal to ledger, you will get the hang of the procedure. So let me move on, and you'll get it after a couple of transactions, right? Should I go ahead, Amal? Okay, Amal. Okay, Amal probably. Amal does agree. So that's how one transaction is recorded in the ledger. The ledger seems empty here. The accounts are different pages of the ledger. So every page, अब यहाँ पर हम यहाँ पे इनकी date डाल देंगे, extreme left side, 20x7. We have July the 1st, the date was July the 1st. And here, 20x7, July the 1st. Right? So basically, if you see, you have columns here. right? Let me just make it just. So you have these columns here in existence. So now we have this additional space in between, right? This additional space here is going to be used for cross-referencing. Cross-refer करने का मतलब होता है since the same transaction is recorded in the ledger on two different pages, then these two pages need to have a connecting link ताकि अगर कोई बुक कीपर एक पार्ट ऑफ द ट्रांजैक्शन पढ़े तो उसको पता लग जाए कि उसका सेकंड पार्ट कहाँ पे रिकॉर्ड हुआ है. So let me write first and then I'll explain it further. So since in the bank account you had a debit entry, then obviously some account must have been credited, some other account must have been credited. So we give the reference of the other account which was involved here. So we put the other account which was involved in this particular entry, capital. And similarly, in the capital account, since we have a credit side entry and we know that the debit was earlier posted in the bank account, then we will use this cross-reference of bank account. Take a capital account and bank account, right? So that's how one transaction is recorded in the ledger. O-level accounting students already are comfortable with this process. So first timers, do we understand how a transaction is recorded, how one transaction is going to be recorded in the ledger? Remember, every transaction in the ledger is going to be recorded on two different pages. Every page of a ledger is what we call an account. So in this case, we decided that we create page 1 per bank account and page number 2 per capital account. And then we enter the amounts on their relevant side. Journal entry instructs us what to do. And then the dates. And then we cross-referred the two. Okay. So, so far I only have 4 checks. So it looks like it's a little problem here. Do we understand this? Oh, okay. So suddenly there's a flood of green checks. Very good. Amal, don't worry. Just hang in there and you'll find it. Maruk, fine. Great. Excellent. Minal, how about you, beta? Minal, is there a problem? Then give me a red mark. Minal is not responding. Maybe a problem with the internet. Okay, now we move on to the next transaction. So right now you can see that we are dealing with this part. Journal entries are being posted to the ledger, right? So every transaction that we record in the journal is going to be posted further to the ledger. So the next transaction wants us to create 2 more accounts in the books. Furniture account needs to be debited with $1,200. Bank account needs to be credited with $1,200. So we come to the ledger. We need bank account, which already exists in your ledger. So we don't have to create a new, or we don't have to sort of dedicate a new page to bank account. An account once created in the ledger will take care of every transactions related to that particular account in future. Like for example, now we have created the bank account in the ledger. Then any transaction that happens this point onwards, which involves a bank debit or a credit to bank, is going to be recorded here in this bank account. We're not going to create another bank account. However, we do not have a furniture account. So we'll create a furniture account here. Let's create a furniture account here. Right, this is your furniture account. Right, the transaction here says that we need to debit. You have the journal right in front. You see furniture account is to be debited and bank account is to be credited. So that means if I reduce this size, so basically we need to post it here and here. In this case, furniture is debited and bank is credited. So that's how we're going to post this entry. So furniture account is debited with $1,200. So we create the furniture account and we choose the debit side. The left side is understood to be the debit side. And before I fill in the remaining formalities, I will go to the bank account and put the credit side entry here in the bank account, right? So that's how this entry is going to be recorded. Debit the furniture account and credit the bank account, right? Do we, let me just fill in the rest. Okay. Then I will take your feedback. So 20x7, we have July the 2nd, and we are going to put here 20x7, July the 2nd. And now the final stage, the most confusing part, the cross-referencing part. So that means we have to cross-refer this entry with the other entry involved. So this is your bank account, and the other entry involved in this was with the furniture. So we are going to cross-refer this to furniture here. So in bank account, we will cross-refer it with the other account involved. In this case was furniture. And in the furniture account, we are going to cross-refer this entry with the other account involved, which was bank, right? So let me show you both the pages here, all the pages here. So if you understand, let me put it here. Okay, if you understand this part here, bank and yeah. So do you understand the ledger posting? Give me a green check if you understand the posting in the second transaction. Excellent. Adia, Iman. Good. Misha doesn't understand it. Okay, Misha. Okay. Maruch, do you understand it? No, actually, okay, Amal understands it. Minal understands it. Acha, sorry, I have missed some things in the chat box. Let me go through it. Fajr says, sir, don't we have to write date and description? You can, basically, you can. You can always give these columns that, like you can see here, I have created these columns, right? You can always title them as date, description, and amount, date, description, and amount. I'm just trying to save time over here. Yes, of course, you can do that. Okay. Maruch doesn't understand, Misha doesn't understand. It's perfectly fine, Maruch and Misha, because that part is always troublesome for the beginners. Don't worry. Your O-level accounting friends, when they did it for the first time, imagine 3 years ago, they were doing this and they were all getting confused. I'm pretty sure they did not get it the first time. They had to have some practice to understand it. So, अच्छा आपके पास जर्नल खुला हुआ है ना, तो आप मुझे ट्रांजैक्शंस बताते जाएं. मैं 2 पेजेस पे अगर इसको ले जाऊंगा ना, तो इट विल बी ईजियर फॉर अस टू see all the information. So I'm going to create a new page here and a new page here, and I'm going to bring the old one here. Sorry. Oh, a new page. What is going on with this app today? After the update, it is behaving very bad. What the hell? Okay. So that will be much better for you to see. Acha. Okay. Misha, let me make this account here. Let me make 2 accounts. So that's how your notebook looks like, right? जैसे अभी आपने अपनी copy सामने खोली होगी. So you can see here that this is how it looks like. So bank and capital account here. Let me put the furniture account here. Let me do this entry here. So the second journal entry says that you have to make the furniture account and you make the debit entry, right, in the furniture account. So this is your furniture account, right? And we understand that the left side of every account that we make is the debit side. This left side is debit side, and this right side is the credit side, because debit and credit means left and side. So if we see the journal here, the journal says the furniture account is to be debited. So that means furniture account में debit side entry होना चाहिए. So that's what we are going to do. We debit the furniture account with $1,200 here, right? That's how we debit furniture account. We always put the amount first. Amount की placement decide करती है कि एक account debit हुआ था या credit हुआ था. If we put the amount on the left side, then that particular account is understood to be debit. So when we put the furniture account में this $1,200 on the left side, then that means the furniture account has been debited. So this is the debit side and this is the credit side, right? So furniture account में 1,200 on the debit side, and the journal entry says that the bank account is to be credited. You have your journal with you, right? So bank account is to be credited. So we have the bank account already existing here. This is the bank account. So how do we credit the bank account? We will choose the right side and we put the amount there. When you put the amount in its appropriate side, that is when an account is said to have been debited or credited, right? So when you put the amount on the debit side of the furniture account here, then the furniture account is said to have been debited. And then the same $1,200 placed here in the bank account, then the bank account is credited, right? So far up to this point, if Maruk and Misha have any problems, please give me or unmute your mic and describe it because we are running out of time, right? So far, any problems, Maruk? Do you understand it, Misha? Yeah, sort of amount placement, Okay, Maruk understood. And Misha, do you understand it? Sort of amount की placement. How do you choose that which side to put the dollar value, right? Understood. ठीक है. Okay. The next step is to put the dates. Dates are simple. ठीक है. You choose the date side either. ठीक है. You do understand that there is a column that exists here. We don't draw it, but this is the date column here on the extreme right hand side, right? You put the date here. July the 2nd, right? 20x7, right? This amount column here, right? Sorry. So the last thing that you need to do is that you need to cross-refer these two entries. So furniture account के अंदर आप बैंक के साथ उसको क्रॉस रेफरेंस प्लेस कर देंगे, बैंक अकाउंट, बिकॉज फर्नीचर अकाउंट अगर डेबिट हो रहा था तो ज़रूर कोई दूसरा अकाउंट क्रेडिट हुआ था ना, एंड वी नो दैट द सेकंड अकाउंट क्रेडिटेड वाज द बैंक अकाउंट हियर, राइट? सो वी विल give the reference of bank account in the furniture account, and in the bank account we will give the reference of furniture account, right? So that's how it's going to be done. One entry here, let me just save it for here, okay? Right, so that's how the first two transactions in the journal have been recorded, have been posted here, right? So do you understand the posting here, Misha and Maru? A green check will do. Okay. Misha and Maru, do you understand? If still no, then it's okay. If you still don't understand, then after today's, sir, are we cross-checking on two different pages? Yeah, basically आप अभी तो अपनी नोटबुक के ऊपर अकाउंट्स बना रहे हैं ना, one after the other, right? So basically cross reference का मतलब simply ये कि you have to give the reference of the other account which was involved in the transaction. So it doesn't matter. अभी तो ये तो पेज symbolic है ना, ये सारे पेज symbolic हैं सारे. आपकी नोटबुक पे तो ये तीनों अकाउंट शायद एक ही पेज पे एग्जिस्ट कर रहे होंगे, right? So referring to the other page is basically a symbolic idea. You just have to enter the name of the other account involved in that transaction. Okay, we have just 2 minutes. Oh, in fact, we're out of time, but it's okay. जिनको समझ आ गई है 2.3 की, ठीक है, जिनको समझ आ गई है वो लोग 2.3 का लेजर कंप्लीट करेंगे और उसके बाद रुक जाएंगे. Tomorrow, whenever we have our next class, नहीं, अच्छा, we will have to have one class on Saturday then, because this part I cannot give a full week's length. This is just too, it's going to be easily lost. So we have to have a class on Saturday. Our class time on Saturday I will communicate later on WhatsApp, because ये काम अगर ज़्यादा gap आ गया तो फिर beginners के लिए it's going to be a problem. That Saturday class is going to be optional for O-level accounting students. If you want to take that, fine. बट इफ़ यू डोंट वांट टू टेक दैट, बिकॉज उसमें हम ये सारे टी अकाउंट्स बनाएंगे, उनको बैलेंस करना सीखेंगे और ट्रायल बैलेंस बनाना सीखेंगे. लेकिन दैट Saturday class is going to be a compulsory class to attend for all the non-O level accounting students. And if you miss that procedure, it's going to be a big problem for you to do later on to catch up with. So we understand Saturday class is optional for O-level accounting students, but Saturday class is a must for non-O-level accounting students. The time will most likely be 11 o'clock, but I will confirm the timing in the WhatsApp group later on. Fajr, आपको आप ओके फजर, मैसेज मी, नहीं आपको स्कूल ने दे दिए होंगे लिंक्स. अगर आपको स्कूल ने मेरा ये जूम का लिंक दिया था तो आपको गूगल क्लासरूम का लिंक भी दे दिया होगा. अगर इन केस नहीं दिया हुआ तो दिस इज़ माई नंबर, नोट इट डाउन एंड मैसेज मी. आई विल पुट यू इन द व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप एंड आई विल send you the Google Classroom link. ठीक है, बाकी सबके पास already, everyone else is on Google Classroom already. Okay, I'm sorry, time is up. You move on now. Thank you very much for today. See you on Saturday. Thank you, Asma.